Now we want to move on to talk about another theory related to consumption and saving, which is called the permanent income theory. The permanent income theory is a theory proposed by Freeman in 1950s. This theory is mainly focused on how the saving behavior change when individual faces different type of income changes. In here, we introduce two types of income changes. One is called temporary income changes, and the other is called permanent income changes. So what are the difference between the temporary income changes versus the permanent income changes? For a temporary income change, you can think about it as a one-time income increase. For example, if you were a farmer and you faces a year of good harvest, and then you are going to have more income this year. However, next year and the year afterward, you will go back to have the same amount of the income, given that the weather will go back to normal, and then you will no longer have such an income increase. Because of that, such an increase in income is temporary because it only changed for a short time, and then later on it will resume to the original level of income. So then how about the permanent income change? For the permanent income change, from the wording you know it is a change that will be permanent. Then you can think about that you worked really hard after you graduated, therefore you got promoted. When you got promoted, your income will be increased, and such an increase will tend to be permanent. So how will these two different type of income change affect the saving and consumption behavior of an individual? The permanent income theory tells us that when an individual faces temporary income changes, that individual will tend to save more of the temporary increase of the income. That is because an individual has the tendency of consumption smoothing. Therefore, if they receive a one-time increase in the income, they will prefer to save those income, and then they will use that for future consumption. Therefore, the consumption will increase only by a small amount of the income increase today, and then you will be able to smooth up your consumption in the future. You can imagine that if you have an income that are supposed to be constant over lifetime, which is $50,000 per month, and then somehow for this month you are going to receive a big bonus, which is $500,000 for this particular month. You will say, hey, $500,000 this month, but for all my entire life after this, I'm going to receive $50,000 at each month. So then if I spend all of them today, then in the futures, I'm going to only have $50,000 left each month to spend. If I save most of them and spread out for my entire life, I'm going to spend more each month, which is, I should be much happier than that. Some of you may say, no, I'm going to spend most of them. I'm going to buy a luxury car and buy a big house, and so that I can have a better life from now on. Well, if you find this example is not that persuasive, let me give you another example. Imagine that you are on an island like Robinson Crusoe, and then somehow due to it is a year of good harvest, your coconut tree yields 1,000 more coconuts this year than last year. So then, as a rational individual, if each year in general the coconut tree produces about 400 coconuts, then you may say, hey, before this temporary income increase, I can eat roughly 1 coconut a day, but then it's impossible for me to eat 4 coconuts in a day. So then what I want to do is that I want to save most of the coconuts, and then I may want to eat probably 2 coconuts in a day, and then for the coming 3 years, I can eat 2 coconuts in a day, which is much better than eating 4 coconuts a day in a year and 1 coconut a day in all the other years. So the permanent income theory tells us that in general, we believe that if the income change is temporary, people only want to change their consumption a little bit, increase it a little bit, and then save the others for future use. And this result is based on the tendency of consumption smoothing for an individual. So then how about if the income change is permanent? How will that affect the consumption and saving decision of an individual? The theory tells us that if it is a permanent change in income, it will lead to a much larger change in consumption. And then most of the increase will be consumed instead of saved. So what could that be? You can imagine that again, you have a monthly salary that is $50,000. And then somehow due to your hard working, you got promoted and your salary now doubles and which becomes $100,000 per month. So then as a rational individual, if there is no bequest, then you may think, well, given that in all my futures I'm going to have $100,000 instead of $50,000, then I can increase my spending from today on, and then I can enjoy a better life, and then I don't need to worry about the future income because that my future income will all be doubled to $100,000. So then in here we notice that if it is a permanent income increase, there is no incentive for consumption smoothing. Therefore, as a rational individual, we will choose to consume large portion of the change. So this permanent income theory is more like a belief, and it is very simple. It says that the temporary income change turned out to be mostly saved, and a permanent income change will be mostly consumed. So this concludes the discussion related to permanent income theory, and this is the end of today's lecture.